and we were able to use their services because we were partnering with them and save thousands of dollars what we would normally have to do to seek out another company to do what they did for us. And they were able to help us design some initial marks and some different wording and go back and forth several times in meetings to shape the logo to the way that we wanted to do that, and really helped with that process. So we were fortunate enough to do that, and they helped us out and get this logo looking really sharp and professional.
All right, so moving into the next slide, we began engaging our community at the end of last spring. So in May, we put together a committee working with Scott and also with Jason Wolford. We identified coaches, as I mentioned, students, parents, alumni, and administrators, and we put together this committee, and we at first reached out to them virtually. So we sent them a survey. We showed them some examples from VIP branding of other logos that in our area that had been redesigned, and we asked for their feedback. So if we go to the next slide, we'll share some of that feedback with you. The first question we asked them was, when we hear the word flyers, what image do we want to be associated with that? And I can tell you overwhelmingly from the responses, and not surprisingly, there is a large affinity for the arch and plane in our community. There's a lot of love for this logo that's behind you, and I think a lot of tradition as well. And so a lot of feedback that we wanted any design moving forward to incorporate that arch and plane, a theme of aviation, and also the arch as we mentioned. But they did give us feedback that if we are going to keep those elements, we want to see them in a more stylized manner. So perhaps the arch would be more of an arc or a swoosh, but still give a nod to that more traditional logo. Next slide. And the overall look and feel, we gave them some other options, but these were the options out of all the choices that were selected. So again, from our athletes, our coaches, and our community, wanting a more distinguished logo, that fierce, aggressive, and tough. We want to be Flyers who are competitive out on the field and out there to win. So those qualities were something that we saw wanting to be reflected. And if we go to the next slide, the logo style preference. So you see here the Parkway West Longhorns logo. This was something that members of our committee liked in the examples that we showed, just the stylization and also how the initial mark was used to represent. And I will tell you that the package that we receive will have a logo, but it will also have that initial mark so that there are different options for us to use. So across the board, the committee did prefer that more modern stylized style for the logo, and then they also wanted an option, like I said, and we did land on using an L for the initial mark. Next slide. So finally, just to recap, some general comments were the arch and plane, honoring that history. They liked the ability to have a branding system. So you see this example and this was from the examples that VIP branding provided of having not only the initial mark, but the logo with the wording and a mascot, which would be the illustration. And we are doing that for our community. And then representing school pride, unity, honor, respect, and team. And reflecting also, though, how we want to conduct ourselves as students, athletes, socially, academically, and on the field. This was great feedback for us to get at the beginning of the summer, and then what we did was our smaller committee here at the district level used that feedback to guide our graphic designer through several drafts of the logo. Scott?
Okay, so after having the survey and having several back and forth meetings with the VIP branding, we brought the committee back together again in September, the same committee that took that survey. And we asked for some additional feedback from them and had another meeting to try to just kind of see if we were close on the mark or where we needed to go. So, Colin, if you can go to the next slide. We had some overall questions that we incorporated, some guiding questions during the meeting to see if the logo represented what the athletic department stood for, to see if we hit the mark with their input, and try to gather some additional feedback to see what they liked or what they wanted to tweak or change, or if there's anything at all that we needed to do differently throughout what we did with the information that we got from them, and then additionally meeting here. So if we click one more slide here, this is the feedback that we received. Overwhelmingly, the group thought that we nailed it. They actually they really loved the new logo and thought that we did a great job of listening and trying to link the old style with the plain and the arch, along with the new modernized and stylistic version of the logo and the initial marks as well, incorporating some of that arch and some of that plain in there as well. They also asked for a couple of different things to see if we could have some one color versions. The coaches are always looking ahead to try to see how's this gonna look on a camp shirt. And we were right there with them to see what it looks like. So there's some flexibility and some options there to where we're using both the detailed version of the old, more closer to the old plain, along with 1 and 2 color versions that would look great on a hat or on a uniform or on a t-shirt or anything else. So that flexibility was great, and there was some good input that we had from those groups. But we even had a member come in saying, I really think that I'm gonna hate this, and turned around and he was like, it's unbelievable. We loved it, and we think that you guys nailed it here. I didn't wink or nudge or anything over there, but yes. But that's what we kind of wanted. We wanted to try to see what was out there and see if there was anybody that was going to push back or resist, and the feedback has been outstanding.
So the next slide will show you just a quick example of what we will I'm sorry, not quite. The logo, these are our notes about the logo for you, and then we'll show you an example of the brand kit. We want to be very clear to our community that the new athletics logo does not replace the district logo. This is an addition to the district logo and will be for athletic programs and the high school. Also, that the logo is customizable, so we'll be able to tag it for any athletic team or program. That includes community ed as well. They're looking forward to having this logo to use for their programs too. And we will have a brand guide, just like we have a district brand guide, that allows all the teams to access their logos and the official colors through their own virtual digital brand locker. Also, once we have approved the final logo, which we actually happened this week, Lindbergh Schools will own all the rights to the logos. So VIP Branding will be able to use it through BSN, but any of our vendors will be able to use it as well, and we'll be able to trademark it through the same process we've used to trademark our district logo. Next slide. So this just shows you an example of what the brand guide will look like, so you can see that there are different versions of a logo, and then people can download various image files. Next slide. So this is our final slide for the athletics logo, just outlining our next steps, which is to, like we said, finalize that logo, and VIP Branding creates the brand guide. And then the high school is going to work with the student body. If Scott, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we're going to continue to speak to our kids. They've got the real pulse of the school and what they want to see as far as a mascot goes. We thought tackle the logo first, and now kind of do a similar process with what they want to see out of a mascot. And we've already started those conversations with the kids and the coaches to try to develop that and continue going with the same process.
And then in January, we are planning to unveil the new logo for the student body first and all school assembly, so we'll be planning that. At the same time, we will also want to unveil the new logo to our community, and we're going to plan that and talk about how we might do that using social media or streaming that as well, so everybody can celebrate that together. Then we will update our digital platforms for high school athletics, including the website and the social media channels. This is really going to be nice because we can brand all of our athletics social media accounts, and people will be able to easily identify the official team accounts for each team. And then we will update uniforms, but that will follow the replacement schedule as they come up.
Right. We'll look to move in this direction, but any teams that have current uniforms, obviously we're not going to say, hey, you need to go out and replace those uniforms. We'll use those, and then when their cycle comes up to where they're going to replace them, then we'll move toward that direction. But anybody that has it currently or is purchasing it up through the winter, I've already spoken with the coaches and just kind of give them a heads up, and I didn't want to hold up any web stores or anything like that as we get closer to the holidays. But after January, when we start new processes up, we'll look to try to incorporate this new logo.
So we're really excited to share it with our community, and I think it was a great process. We heard a lot of voices throughout the process. So does anyone have any questions? All right. Thank you, Scott.
Okay, thank you.
I have a few more items for our communications compass goals that I'll go through quickly. We are rolling out a platform called Canva, and for those of you who are not familiar with Canva, it's a graphic design tool that is part of their mission is to support education, so they offer free accounts to all educators. So we worked with Canva over the summer to connect with them with a Lindbergh account so that any Lindbergh employee can now get on through a Google single sign-on. We'll actually be sending out an email this week to all of our Lindbergh staff to make them aware of it if they haven't already discovered that. But the reason we haven't communicated yet is we've been building brand guides for all of our staff in Canva. So each staff member will have a team that's specific to their school, and when they log in, they'll be able to access their school logos, their colors, our district fonts, and they'll be able to customize any of those graphic design tools with their brand, with our brand. And in addition, Colin's been involved with this process in making sure that we have professional learning connected to it, and Canva offers that for free to us. So there will be a Lindbergh U course that is co-taught by a Canva instructor. Colin's going to have some learning with Canva learning lunches that are available for teachers to attend via Zoom. And then we'll also be providing some professional learning on how Canva can integrate with Canvas, so teachers can use it for assignments as well. We've been using Canva in our department for a while now. It's a great tool. We're really excited about this. So if you go to the next slide, you can just see some examples of different types of materials that are available in Canva. And it's also, I should mention, it's available to teachers and staff, but it's also available to students through their Lindbergh account. So we're excited about that. And if we go to the next slide, one of our other compass goals we've been working on is the design for the Lindbergh High School lobby. And if you go next slide, please, you can see that big white wall when you come into the main entrance is blank. We put out an RFP for design services, and we are talking with a group called CESO, C-E-S-O Design, and they are working with us to build a timeline and provide us with some specifics regarding cost for designing this area. And as you'll see on the next slide, the wall kind of wraps around to the skywalk also. And our idea for this that we've mentioned before is really representing our entire community through hopefully some type of like photo montage where we can have pictures from all over our community that make a larger image. So we are working with that design company, and if we go to the next slide, they're finalizing an agreement for us right now that will allow us to design and install this in time for the start of the next school year. All right, next slide. On Friday at our community breakfast, we unveiled the brand new Lindbergh Schools Foundation website, which was redesigned. We had a partner in our community, Zanny Becker, who's with Kalina Digital, and her husband Nick offered their services to us for free. So they do digital marketing, and they were able to help the foundation increase our search engine optimization, reorganize our site, and divide it better for our audiences. So for donors and for teachers and for students looking for scholarships, it's just better organized and has a nice new design. We've also developed a communications plan for the slider graphic that you see at the top. So all of the different events that take place through the foundation throughout the year will have a slot there that lines up with their events. And we have a new URL as well, and that is lindberghschoolsfoundation.org. So we're excited about that. Next slide. My last item, our last compass goal to update you on is our district mobile app. And this was just a quick update for you. This came out of our Technology Board Advisory Committee. We got some feedback on how we can make the app more usable and more user-friendly. And some of the feedback we got was, can we use the app to create a one-stop shop for our families where all the Lindbergh apps are in one place? So that's what you're seeing here. We've added all the apps that our Lindbergh parents use most often, and we've put them on the app for our district so that you can download all of those in one place. And that is the communications update. Thank you.
Any questions for anybody? Anything? All right, next up we have Dr. McKinney in HR.
Great, thank you. We've got 3 topics to speak to you tonight. 2 of those are Compass goals, and then finally, I wanted to walk through the recommendations from our HR audit and just go and through each one and talk about our progress in implementing those recommendations. So we've got several people here to speak with us again. We've really been working Scott Luchek hard. He's doing double duty. He's going to come up, I think, with each department. He'll be talking this evening. So 3 topics, as I said. First of all, this year we've decided to do an overall study of extra duty, extra pay. So extra duty, extra pay really involves coaches, athletics, that's why Scott's here. It involves our fine arts directors. It involves our work extension people, department chairs, building leadership folks. It involves all of our club sponsors. It's a big endeavor, and every 5 years or so, we look back and make sure that are we paying the appropriate wages? Are our pay structures in place competitive so that we can keep our coaches and our band directors? And also, are the working conditions good? Do we have a good way to evaluate people? Are we hiring the people that we want? And so Jamie Cavato has put a team together. This will go in phases. They've started with athletics, and that's who you see here before you tonight to talk about the beginning of the extra duty, extra pay study. And then after that, we're going to talk about job description reviews, and that involves our Lindbergh Association of Office Professionals, and we have members of that group as well, and they're going to talk about what is a very important aspect of managing personnel, and that is to make sure that job descriptions have essential duties and that they're up to date and they've been revised. The last time we did a comprehensive job description review was in 2014, so it's time to revisit that again, and we're going to do that with each employee group, and we're starting this year with LEOP. And so without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jamie to talk about extra duty, extra pay.
All right, thank you, Dr. McKinney. So this is a pretty big project. Like Brian said, we have 3 groups that we will be working with this year, and one of the first groups we started off with would be athletics. So Scott is here with us, and Courtney O'Connor is here for LNEA because she's worked extensively with the high school crew, looking at different salary schedules and placements of coaches and where they're at compared to other districts and things of that nature. But this is one of our Compass goals, and we've decided to break it up into 3 groups. And the second group is fine arts, so that will be the next group that I'll be working with. And then the next one will be building clubs and active MISHA clubs. So keeping that separate from sports. And all of those will be different stakeholders, about 12 to 15 members on each committee. We're starting to meet now in October, and then moving forward, this group has the pleasure of working with me once a month to walk through our process. And I'm very big on voices, and I'm always not the smartest person in the room, so I gather all the smartest people, and we sit around and we talk things through. And one of the things that we did starting last Thursday was our first meeting, was to establish a timeline. What is this going to look like the next few months? What is our end goal? Then one of the things that I did first of all was have Scott present with his team the work that they've done at the high school. And they started, I think it was last March?
Yes.
Springtime, yeah. So I said, let's wait till the fall and start our processes moving forward with them bringing forward a proposal. And so that's what we did last week. And then also I met with Joelle, who's been a great partner in this with me because we've benchmarked coaches' salaries in all the districts and where are our coaches' salaries compared to other districts in the 3 through 5 range, because we know that is your goal, and Dr. Lakes as well. So we shared that information with
5 to
them
8.
as individual.
5 to 8,
Five.
not 3 to 5, 5 to 8.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry. But what our goal is with the end of all of this is to make sure, like Dr. McKinney said, that we're compensating everyone for their time, the time after school, the work with students. Student involvement is very dear to my heart from being a secondary administrator. The more kids we have involved in activities, the more school spirit and pride and kids have in their academics and their involvement at school. So I'm gonna let Scott talk a little bit about the process at the high school, and Courtney can chime in on her pieces on the team.
Thank you. Figure out the button this time. Colin, you don't mind going to the next slide here? As you guys all know, we have outstanding kids, and our student athletes are no different. They're a great representation of our district, and so are our coaches. We've got unbelievable coaches as well, and a lot of them, a lot of coaches, a lot of student athletes. I've got up there some of our programs. We've got 27 different programs. Those are just our sports programs with Misha, and each of those have various levels of freshman, JV, and varsity. And in 2020 and 2021, we had 989 students on rosters on those Misha sports. And then the following year, we had a little bit of a drop with some of the COVID reasons, but also we had a great number of athletes that were 2 and 3 sport athletes too. So that kind of made a difference. And that's what that third number is. 741 kids made up those 893 slots of the 21-22 school year. And with all of those great student athletes, which that's, over 30% of our school involved in just those sports, that doesn't include band and the music and just a great number of extracurriculars is so important to our district, and those good kids involved in a lot of different activities. But with all those numbers, we need a large number of coaches. We have 86 coaching positions currently, and of those 86 positions, 61 individuals fill those roles. And so last year, as Jamie said, we started talking to coaches and trying to see what we can do, and we met, and with Courtney has done a lot of research and done an outstanding job of putting some numbers together and putting some charts together and putting some steps together for us to look at as coaches to evaluate where we're at and look at comparable numbers to other districts as well. So we met with Courtney, myself, Dr. Cochran, and Coach Wolford last year, and then we also had additional meetings with coaches to kind of go over numbers and see, and Rich Flores was involved in that process as well, and looking to see, well, what do we need to do to narrow this down and try to make sure that we're getting something comparable to what other districts are in that range that Dr. Lake mentioned, to try to get our outstanding coaches up to where they should be because they work so hard and do a great job with our kids. And so some of the things that we took into consideration were the number of years those coaches were involved in their fields, the length of the seasons, because they vary from, some of them have a little bit shorter seasons, some of them go throughout all of the holidays over the winter and go for 4 months. The number of athletes that are involved in each one of those programs vary as well. And then the hours per week, hours per day for those competitions and practices. Some of them, the competitions aren't very long, but they do practice for a long time. And some of them have Saturdays where they're all day for a meet and last a long time. So took those things into consideration. And like I said, Courtney has done a great amount of work in putting things together and helping us kind of look to see what direction we need to go.
So I kind of started this process I guess towards the end of last year. I got Dr. McKinney's permission to really start diving into this stuff and talk to Eric Cochran. And we really just wanted to look at where we are, compare ourselves to our other districts, just like we always do, those people who we compete with sports, to try to see, well, are we actually being paid competitively with those people? And sometimes we are, and sometimes we aren't. Sometimes we're winning, and sometimes we're losing, just like sports. But we really feel good about where we're at. We are all kind of on the same page. We feel like we have a plan, and we've done a lot of research. We've made a lot of spreadsheets. I can share them with any of you if you want to look at the spreadsheets. I'm really good at making spreadsheets. And I think that we have a good plan moving forward. We have a great team of people who are really working to kind of fine-tune all this stuff. And we hope to have a proposal ready soon. She said March. I said February. Really like it to be January, but we'll see. It all depends on the money, right, Joelle? Right. It all depends on the money. And this is then going to drive the rest of our conversations for when we talk about clubs and how do we compensate our clubs and how do we compensate our music. This is like our pilot group. And then hopefully the work that comes out of this can really drive the rest of extra duty, extra pay so that we can continue to compensate our people adequately for years to come.
And if I could just add, this is, what I like to see about this is it's not just Joelle and Brian and Jamie sitting in a room with calculators saying, hey, let's do this ourselves. There are stakeholders involved here, and that Jamie's got a great group together and a lot of voices at the table, so that's important. Any questions on that
Guys, any
topic? Well, thank you both for being here. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Courtney, you were just saying, I've seen some of your spreadsheets, yay, color copies. Do we have half that are below the 5 through 8? Do we have half that are above? Do we have, and I don't need a solid number, just,
It really depends on the sport.
Okay.
And looking at the history of how our sports have been compensated, it's been a lot of times based on kind of like a years of service type thing. And so our coaches who have been coaching for a long time are much more competitive. It's more of our newer coaches who we're seeing aren't really competitive at all. Or maybe those ones that are smaller sports, we shouldn't call them that, but sports that are not as popular. So it's not like your footballs and your basketballs and that kind of stuff. Those are fairly comparable, but it's our smaller sports that we're seeing a lot of discrepancies, I think, more than that. We're about 50-50.
Great question. All right. Thank you, Scott and Courtney, very much for your time this evening. And
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
all right, our next topic, last year in negotiations with our Lindbergh Association of Office Professionals, we talked about job descriptions was something that came up, and we knew at that time that it was too big of a project to do in the scope of the negotiation cycle, but we knew it would take a full year to review. And so Rachel has given generously of her time. Rachel Sloneker is the president of Lindbergh Association of Office Professionals. Melissa Wallace is here as well. She's a great number cruncher and organizer on the HR team that helps us with these projects. And we are digging into job descriptions and working on ensuring that those descriptions are accurate, that they reflect the modern job that these folks do every day for us, and that they provide an accurate depiction of essential duties and responsibilities. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jamie.
All right, so this is another one of, it wasn't exactly a goal specifically for admin assistants, but looking over all of our job descriptions over the next couple of years and hopefully having them on a continuum that every 3 years they're reviewed and revised. So then all job descriptions are updated. But what came out of LAOP negotiations this year is we were having discussions of placement of individuals on salary schedules. And you can't really do that if you have a job description from 2014 or even later. It's really hard to do that. So one of the things that we decided is that we would reopen our agreement, and two pieces to that are job descriptions and also their evaluation tools. So tonight we're just going to talk a little bit about the job description review and the why. So I'm going to go ahead and let Rachel kind of dive into the agreement and the process, and then we'll go from there.
I didn't realize Scott pressed the button to turn it off.
Next slide, please.
Okay, so there has been a spirit of collaboration between the district and the support staff where there maybe hadn't been before. And so as we were going through these discussions, we were really struggling to come together on the salary schedule. And we finally figured out that really the crux of this was job descriptions, because if your job description is old, how do you compare it to a salary that is current? How do you compare it to a different district? You can't benchmark the salaries to a different district if you haven't benchmarked what other people do, because even within our district, our admin assistants don't do the same job. So Long's admin assistant doesn't necessarily do the same thing as Sparing's admin assistant. Kirkwood's admin assistants don't do the same thing as Lindbergh's admin assistants or Rockwood's admin assistants. So we really felt like exploring the job descriptions was going to be a crucial part to get this right, to make it fair for everybody.
And one of the perks and bonuses I feel like Rachel hit on is, you know, we really have worked hard together with the admin assistants starting last school year. They've had professional learning. They've came together as a group on 4 PL days last year. We opened professional learning this year about climate and culture. What does that look like amongst their team and their group? And we have our next one coming up next Monday. And we're doing a book study on a book called Atomic Habits. So just really not only looking at their job descriptions and what they do, but their why. You know, why do you come to work every day? And why is it important for you to perform the duties and the roles that you do at your building, and how do you support? And so I'm gonna let Melissa share a little bit about this task, because once Melissa and I sat down and shared out all the job descriptions, we realized, wow, well, there are 25 job descriptions out there right now, and we have 42 administrative assistants. So that is going to be a big project and task, along with extra duty and extra pay that I certainly couldn't take on myself. So I'm gonna let Melissa talk a little bit about her support on the project.
So as Jamie mentioned, we had quite a list, so we figured to divide and conquer would be the best. So we split up the list, and we have scheduled individual meetings with each admin assistant. So prior to that, we shared out their job description as well as a Google survey, asking them to let us know what their day-to-day activities are, weekly, monthly, yearly, and then what efficiencies get in the way of them being able to do their job. Because sometimes there are things that, you know, unintended consequences happen, and we want to know those things that maybe we can find a solution and improve some things during the day so they can really have the best work environment. So from that, they have been given several weeks to review their job descriptions, and then we've got all of our meetings scheduled. We will be going and visiting with everybody for about 30 minutes to review the job description, read their notes on anything that they say they do not do anymore, and their notes on tasks that they do now that maybe didn't exist previously, and then to review those survey results that they filled out. So we're really going to take a lot of information and do a lot of listening with each person, and then come back. And then from there, Jamie and I will sit down, go through all of that data, try to compare and group, you know, grab the admin assistants from the elementary levels, find the similarities, try to put all of that into the elementary job description, and then go through that process with each job description. And then from there, we'll reconvene with everybody, share out those updated job descriptions, review all of that again, and then hopefully we'll get through this over the next couple of months, and we hope to have this project wrapped up in the spring, and then get back into the negotiations reopener and hopefully solidify this project. And as Jamie mentioned, keep this kind of on a cycle, so it's something that just automatically happens, that doesn't have to be brought up and looked at, but that we're trying to be a little more proactive and stay on top of.
Okay, questions about that process?
So sorry, just to clarify, so the goal is that there'll be one job description for elementary, one for middle, and one for high school when it comes to admin assistants?
In a sense.
In a sense, yes. So we will still have, and we may not though, 25 job descriptions. It's going to depend on what we find out when we go to the buildings. So if we could get that down a little bit, that would be fantastic, because that's a lot of job descriptions, when essentially some of them might be performing the same roles and responsibilities, but it is always going to look different at every building. You just have to get to what is the surface level, what do I do every day? And that was one of the things that we asked. What do you do every day? What's a weekly task? What's a monthly task, like a 30, 60, 90 plan? So I think that will help us narrow down some of those job descriptions as well.
And I would just add that no job description is going to say that everything that you do, right?
Yeah.
Because they would be 1,000 pages long. But what a good job description has, it's compliant legally. Ours are compliant legally, so they say what they're supposed to say. but then they should have an accurate description of the most essential duties and responsibilities, and that's what you're going for. So certainly we wanted to paint with a broad brush here, but we need to not have 25 probably at the end of the day.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great
I
question.
just want to add, I'm super excited we're doing this because there's an evolution in job descriptions out
Yep.
there and differences in titles. What used to be an admin assistant, something different. What used to be a recruiter is now talent acquisition. So super excited that we're doing this and hopefully that'll help everybody be motivated and excited to come to work and feel fairly compensated.
Thank you guys very much. And finally, just quickly, I know we're running low on time, so I will go quickly through the HR recommendations and just give you a quick status update. So we can go to, we've got the slide up there. So the first recommendation was investigative training for AC and ACA policies. AC is our prohibition against discrimination, harassment. ACA is the Title IX version of that, so it's ACA and AC1, they're very similar. And so that is complete. We have had our first training with all district administrators and supervisors. It was conducted by Emily Omohandro of Ed Council, which is one of our school law resources. We also are looking into a vendor recommended by Kathy Carlick-Lorenz, and it is called the Reed Technique of Interviewing Interrogation. They did this at Parkway, and I think you found it to be extremely valuable, so they're definitely in our plans for the future. So we'll continue with training in that regard. The next recommendation was adding to current policy GBH, which that is student and staff relations. We need to include a better, more broad definition of sexual abuse language and detecting signs of abuse. So this is in progress. We will certainly add it to the vector training, but even more than that, another layer, we want to work with Jill Lawson on some opportunities we've identified for our school counselors to help with that as well. Highlighting policies GBCB, which is staff conduct, GBH, which I mentioned is staff student relationships, AC and ACA. Those are the four main policies that were impacted with this audit. In-person staff meetings to reinforce the importance of the topics. You'll see in a little bit that it was recommended that these are all linked into and referred to in handbooks, and that's something that is complete and was in the works before this audit, which is, a few of these things were in the works before the audit, so the audit affirmed what we were doing. We have a monthly, twice a month we meet with principals, but one of those times we get to be in person in front of them and we pick an HR topic each time. This will certainly be part of a presentation for principals, and then we'd like to train the trainer, so to speak, so they would then go back and have a similar agenda item during their staff meetings. The next item is adding to the handbooks. As mentioned, that was a pretty easy one to do, and it is done. Investigation document protocol, this is an in the works one. We were happy to see this one because it was done already. I have something like this in my folder that sits on my desk, and it's a one-sheet piece of paper that tells me basic things to go through anytime I'm starting an investigation, and I do refer to it even after all these years. So we developed a quick reference guide like this to assist all of our administrators. It was developed by Emily at Ed Council. Again, she's been a great resource, and all administrators have that now. And then finally, forms. Again, pretty easy thing to accomplish, and we already had forms for policy ACA. They're forms that came from MSBA to us as part of those regulations through Title IX. So it says in progress here because we're tweaking those forms to make them also applicable for AC. So those will be completed very soon. And that is our implementation progress on the audit recommendations. Happy to answer any questions. Okay, that's all from HR. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Next, we have Dr. Sparks and her team. So, Dr. Sparks.
Yes, we're going to welcome Drs. Hamby and Zagora to join me for the beginning of this presentation. Then we also have a couple of teacher guests who will join us in a little bit. going to start by focusing on our work around professional learning communities. We often use acronyms, so PLCs, if you hear me say that I am referencing professional learning communities, which are at the heart of our work in supporting students in terms of standards-based learning and social emotional learning. And you can see our compass goal here is that we really wanted to focus on 100% implementation of our PLCs. Historically, whenever you have something that is essential to your work, you become complacent and you think, we know how to do this, we've been doing this for a really long time. And you need to really be purposeful and intentional about giving it the attention that it needs to refresh. A lot of times what we see with professional learning communities when groups of teachers or even we as administrators get together, that what becomes urgent is what we focus on and not necessarily the things that are most impactful for students. So one of our focuses throughout the course of focusing on professional learning communities this year and rebuilding those structures is to really focus on what's most important and most impactful for our students. And that starts with us reevaluating the processes that we have at central office as well. So we've redefined district structures and then have used that to support building development of structures, teacher development of structures. So when you go to the next slide, you're going to see some examples of different agenda templates. And I just use this to highlight how we've shifted our work. So this snip of a teaching and learning big team, and to define a big team, that is when our executive directors, our coordinators come together. We even have our teacher representative and our professional learning chair who is a part of this meeting, where we are really focusing in on our compass goals, looking at those in terms of, what are the priorities that we've set for ourselves, what is the data that we're looking at, and then how do we work on transferring that learning and that knowledge beyond us to what's happening at the building level. So we have a 4-week rotation for how we structure those meetings, with the priority being on what we know is going to be most impactful for students. And then we do save ourselves some time for that tactical stuff, because we have to do those things that we just need to check the box on as well. When you go to the next slide, you see an example of our leadership template from our district leadership team. And this is comprised of all of our principals and assistant principals, as well as cabinet coordinators, the teaching and learning team. And again, really focusing in on what is our work as a PLC within the leadership. We have created data calendars at each level. So at the district level, we have data calendars to look at various sets of data throughout the course of the year. We've asked our principals to do the same. And then we identify areas of best practices that can be shared within those meetings. And again, this is a way to model what we expect to see happening at the building level. And if you go to the next slide, we'll start seeing what is happening at the building level with some of these structures.
So I picked out 4 examples to share this evening from the elementaries. So the one on the left is Dressel. So really, every building has to have a protocol for professional learning communities. They can be different. They get to pick, they meet with their building leadership team and decide what's going to work for their individual building. But they all have to have a protocol. Now, they're really built, if you look at the one on the right, that one is from Kinnerly. Jessica McCarty now, used to be Bangor. That's her team. I didn't know she was going to be here, but it worked out. So those 4 essential questions are really, that's Rick DeFore's work. That's what we base all of our professional learning communities off. What do we want our students to know? How are we going to know if they have learned it? What if they didn't learn it? What do we do if they already know it? So they're all kind of based off of that. So the Kinnerly one really spells it out, what those essential questions are. Dressel uses Plan, Do, Study, Act. So that's their protocol. And the one thing I really like in the middle is they do it. Here's exactly what we're going to do this week. So it really makes sure we know what we're focusing on. Can you go to the next slide, Colin? So then here we have Concord on the left. Same 4 essential questions, but theirs is a little, they don't spell them out exactly, but you can see in there that they're looking at data for their students. And at the bottom, they're working on common grading practices, which are integral to being successful as a team. And then the last example I was sharing, this is from the Gifted department, Tom Anderson from Gifted back there, I did this perfectly, just kismet. I liked this because it's the 4 critical questions, but it's the student view of them. What would a student think of these 4 critical questions? So it was a different take. I'd never seen it before, but Dr. Bednarik had been using that with the Gifted department, so I thought it was really interesting. So every building, ECE, all the elementaries, and Gifted all have their own protocol. They're all similar, but not exactly the same. So those are just some examples.
All right, and now I'll jump into some middle and high school examples. So similarly, you'll notice they're going to be very different building to building, and aside from just the flexibility to meet the needs of those teachers, these are also designed with those teacher leadership teams. And so our instructional coaches play a major role in this. They often provide some tools and templates, and then the teacher teams decide what works best for them. So this is an example from Sparing, and actually this is a page out of a notebook tool that Dr. Lawson had created for data analysis. And so she had pulled together some of the best resources to help guide those data conversations in our PLCs, and this is one from 6th grade science at Sparing. And so you can see that there are, in addition to having those key common questions that they're focusing on, room to really break down the data and student performance. And this also would help them then create those different groupings for small group instruction and reteaching or enrichment opportunities that they see based on the student data. Next slide, please. This is an example agenda from Truman. This is Truman's 8th grade ELA PLC. And so again, those 4 questions that you're going to see on just about every document, really always zeroing in on the work, the cycle of the PLC work. But here's an example where it worked better for them to have a checklist. And so they have their agenda components, they've got their to-do list, all of those items are tied back to the purpose of the PLC, but also just like our teaching and learning agenda, leave some time for the nuts and bolts kind of stuff that you have to manage along with that constant PLC cycle. Next slide. This is an example of a PLC agenda for a high school PLC. So again, with our efforts at flexibility to meet our teachers where they are, give them the support that they need. In some cases, we have PLCs that have been functioning for years, and everybody kind of understands their role in that PLC and they work very efficiently. And then sometimes we have new PLCs that year to year have had different members come and go, and they're trying to establish some norms and really establish that community. And so this is an example of an agenda that a PLC could use if they really need to identify what are the roles of all of the people in this group. How do we make sure that we keep our work moving forward and we don't get caught up in, sometimes those maybe arguments about semantics on a quiz that you're developing or something like that. So that is your high school example. All right, changing gears here for a second. So one of our Compass goals in teaching and learning this year we're both implementing and then researching, investigating expansion of various programs to help our students reach that college and career readiness. And so one of these programs that we will be implementing next school year is the AVID program. So I will explain a little bit about what it is and then where we are in our planning for AVID. Next slide. So AVID is a program for our students that I think the easiest way to describe it is our students in the middle. We have a lot of great programming and opportunities for our students who have accelerated or our AP programs. We know that they're college bound. They have strong support structures at home. We also have a lot of programs that are intervention and supports for our students that need that. And then we have quite a few students that do fine, they do well, they float along, but they don't necessarily get targeted support to help them realize something beyond what they may think their own potential is. And so that's what we're trying to do with AVID. Next slide, I'll explain kind of where we go with this. So what it is, it's an academic program and it will start out next year. It's just an elective course for a handful of students that we will have recruited and selected through a process that frankly, we're still developing. But our goal is that we will identify a cohort of incoming 9th graders that kind of fit this profile of an AVID student, and they will take the AVID elective course and then also get support in their core courses to help them build those key skills that we know are really important for being successful in our most challenging classes and then also ultimately being successful in college. Next slide. So here's a typical student that we would be trying to recruit for AVID. They don't necessarily have to meet all of these criteria. As I said, that process is still in development for us of really what are we looking for with our future AVID students, and then helping our counselors, we'll be working with our 8th grade counselors to reach out to those students and recruit them. Our goal for AVID is that this is not something that we're telling students they have to do. We're inviting them into what is a really great opportunity to help them be successful in our most rigorous coursework at the high school level. So these may be kids who have never taken an honors course or have never accelerated, but they're good students, they get passing grades, but maybe they're first generation college students, or maybe they don't necessarily have a support structure outside of school that is encouraging them to reach for something beyond a high school education. So we'll be identifying those students. They will then enroll in that AVID elective course, which is going to give them study skills, note-taking strategies, a lot of basic core literacy, reading and writing skills that will then be transferable to the other courses they take. And our goal for AVID students is going to be that they're always taking at least one honors or AP course along the way to help them build those skills in the context of their non-elective course. Next slide. So this just identifies what some of those strategies will be. The AVID program has a very robust evidence-based, I would say, repertoire of strategies that our teachers who are teaching the AVID elective will learn. Our AVID elective teachers will be teachers that also just teach our core 9th grade classes. And so they'll get the training that they need to teach the elective course, but also to incorporate those skills into the 9th grade core classes that they're teaching. And then ultimately, as the students get through 9th, 10th, and on into 11th and 12th grade, there will always be a thread returning to that post-secondary planning. So what are your aspirations for college? What does that look like? How can we help you? Communication with parents to bring them along this journey as well and make sure that the students have all the support they need to have a solid plan for when they graduate from us. Quick summary of where we are in our planning and implementation. So we've identified a site team with our high school team. That includes teachers, counselors, administrators. We have, like I said, included our 8th grade counselors as we've started these conversations. We will be visiting the AVID program in Columbia, Missouri in a few weeks. They've been doing it for a long time, and actually one of our high school counselors here at Lindbergh worked with the AVID program when he was a counselor in Columbia before coming to Lindbergh. So he's got a lot of expertise and has had some great advice along the way. We are developing the course description and the application process for that future cohort of students. We will be selecting them and doing that course registration process second semester. We hope to do some additional site visits as well to other places that are using AVID. And then we will have some parent and student meetings, communication along the way, make sure everyone understands what this is and how it can benefit them. And then over the summer, our site team and our teachers, we will all, including myself, will all go through some training with the AVID program so that we are ready to hit the ground running in August of next year. Any questions about AVID before I move into my next topic?
So I just want to make a comment. So we started this investigation year of
Right before COVID.
Yeah, so they were on a site visit, some schools in Texas, right?
yeah.
And so we had to hit the pause button for the last few years, but we're excited about this. I'm familiar with this as a high school principal. I had this program as well, and it serves a population sometimes that doesn't get that attention, and it really helps kids push them academically that have the ability to do it, but may just need that extra support. And basically they become a team of kids for 4 years. It's an elective they take all 4 years. They stay with that same teacher, becomes a mentor or a coach. And again, we're starting out with one cohort group. If it grows, we may add more and more. We'll just see how that plays out. But I know I'm excited about it, so.
Yeah, so are we.
And how many kids are hoping, sorry, she can go.
Yeah, go ahead, Julia.
If this all works out and everybody's really happy with it, is this something that they might look to expand down to like the 7th and 8th graders? Because I could see these skills really being great to develop a little earlier than high school even.
Yeah, so Julia, if you couldn't hear that, Julia said, what about expanding it down into the middle school? Absolutely. AVID it goes all the way down into the middle school. And so we're going to start with 9th grade. We're going to see how that goes. And eventually we could be a 6 through 12 AVID program as well with kids. So yes, great question, Julia.
And how many in each cohort are we hoping to do?
So if we do a single section of the elective, we're probably talking about 20 kids or so. That's simply just how we would schedule them into 1 hour of that elective. If it turns out that we have a lot of students that would be great candidates, then we can always do a couple hours, offer it more than once, but we're going to start small and see where it goes.
So I'm going to chime in because Ronnie and I haven't talked about this based on my experience.
Just kidding. It's whatever Dr. Lake says next.
So we're probably going to start out closer to 30 because we will have kids fall out of that. They'll get into it. They'll think it's for me. It's not. You start with 20. We probably will end up with 15 to 14 kids by the time they're seniors. So that freshman year, they will be co-taught. So there'll be 2 teachers for that upper 20s to 30. I wouldn't want to go above 30, but if we had 30 kids we felt could do that. In the high school now has space with flexible collaboration spaces, there's ways for us to manage that. So we want to try to serve as many kids. So sorry, Ronnie, we hadn't really had time to.
No problem.
Yeah,
That
and
is
that's
a
just
welcome
based on
correction.
experience of.
The more the
of
better, in
seeing
my view.
Yeah, the program and as it goes through. So, but yes, about 30.
All right, thank you. Okay, and then my next slide is just a quick update for you all about our aviation program. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I spoke with the board, I believe it was in the spring, about some of our career and tech ed programs, and I gave you a preview of our aviation course that we're really excited about. So that will be launching, taking flight. I'm going to drop as many puns as I can. In the spring semester. So we have 3 sections of that Aviation 1 course. So we've got, I think, 60-something students. And they will take that spring semester Aviation 1 course, which is really going to be an introduction into kind of the basics of flight and some of the math and science behind it, and start to really understand what would be required then for students who want to pursue it as a career path. And then next school year, we will be adding the Aviation 2 course, which will also be a semester long. And for students who complete all of the requirements in that Aviation 2 class and meet the age requirement, they could finish that course with what's called the Part 107 certification, and that is a drone pilot's license for those students. So that is currently what we have planned to offer this year and next year, but we're certainly starting the conversation about longer term. What does this look like for students who want a career in aviation with piloting or with aviation mechanics? And there are so many resources and potential partners in the St. Louis region to do something like this. And just since we started the conversation a couple of years ago, we've had a lot of outreach from partners in the community saying, hey, we want to get on board. We'd love to support your students. And so the teacher that will be teaching this course has already started to build those relationships with those individuals and plan for them to come meet with his students and support this journey. And so we're excited about getting it off the ground and then seeing where we can go with it over the next few years for students that want to make a career of aviation.
Thank you, Ronnie. Earlier, we talked about PLCs. I'm going to throw another acronym at you, TLC, the Teacher Leadership Cohort. We've got Tommy Anderson and Jessica McCarthy who are going to come up and join us at the table here. Teacher Leadership Cohort is actually a Compass goal that went into full implementation last year, and we didn't have the opportunity to share that, so I want to highlight with you how Cohort 1 went last year. We currently have Cohort 2 in full implementation right now, and as a reminder, the purpose behind Teacher Leadership Cohort is twofold. One, to develop our teacher leaders. We know that we are stronger with the leadership of our teachers, that if we can build the capacity and give opportunities to further the learning of our teachers, to grow their leadership capabilities, then we are going to accelerate all of the Compass goals that we have and the work that we want to achieve for the benefit of our students. So there's that goal, but there's also the goal of, as a follow-up, those who have been in Teacher Leadership Cohort have the opportunity to participate in the Aspiring Principals Academy, which is a way to, again, further develop leadership skills and consideration of future administrators within the district. So a couple of opportunities that exist by participating in Teacher Leadership Cohort. This is an application-based program, so we accept 12 students. I called you guys students. 12 teachers per year in this program, and it is a year-long program. If you go to the next slide, I'll kind of give a little bit of an overview of what we do over the course of the year. It is a full year-long personalized study where we focus in on kind of understanding our own strengths. So we do a lot of work with Strengths Finders, as well as leadership and leadership skills and working with others. So we use Brene Brown's work of Dare to Lead. So 2 really in-depth book studies. And at the beginning of each teacher leadership cohort, we start with a student shadowing experience. Because if we can begin with that design thinking process of understanding what the student experience is, then we know, what do we want to impact? What do we want to grow as teacher leaders within our building or our program to further support the development of our students? And then throughout the course of the year, we spend a lot of time working with courageous conversations. How are you both a colleague and a leader? Those are complicated topics, and try to do a lot with scenario building around those. And then wrap up the year. One of the benefits of being a part of the teacher leadership cohort is the opportunity to attend a national conference. conference that meets the goals that they have set out in their personalized plan of study. And then we wrap up the year with, what are you going to do with this? How are you going to take the learning that you've done this year to really impact programs and support students within your building, and like I said, programs before. So if you go to the next slide, Tommy and Jessica are here. They were in the first cohort. They are now also in the Aspiring Principals Academy. They can share kind of their observations and, yeah.
So overall, it was a great experience. Sorry, guys. Okay, so learning about all the different strengths was a huge benefit for us because not only did we identify our own strengths, but we also were able to identify our coworkers' strengths. And that kind of led to how do we approach different scenarios with them and work on that courageous conversations as well as pulling on their strengths for our teams and in our PLCs. The courageous conversations was very impactful, especially for me because I'm working on my conversations and being courageous and making sure I'm a little bit confrontational when I don't like to be. So that was a huge benefit for me. And then a big thing that I really enjoyed about it was that we got to talk with Dr. Sparks a lot about different things that we are noticing, and especially with the change process, what things are impactful, what things might need to be changed a little bit. And she took our advice, and actually I've personally seen changes made because of that. So that was really beneficial.
Colin, could I get you to go back one slide? I based my talking points off this slide. I could say great things about every part that's up there, but I know for time purposes I can't. So 3 highlights I would make is the student shadowing combined with the leadership panel was a great way of getting 2 different lenses that we normally don't get to see day to day as a teacher in the classroom. The second big thing was the courageous conversations. I know that those are a critical part of being a leader, and there's something that most people typically aren't real comfortable doing. But I feel every time that we practiced, it became easier to do, and the quality of our conversations was improving each time, so I'm glad we got to practice that a lot. But the most important part for me was that session 8, building capacity for change. I know that you guys made an investment in us with the time and the opportunity to do this class. What are we giving back? I looked forward to these meetings every month. We got to see people that were not from our building and build relationships where we became comfortable enough that we started trading ideas, talking about what was working in our buildings, what was working in other buildings, how do we fix problems we're having. So I feel like it engaged a lot of conversation that wouldn't have been happening because we weren't seeing these people. And then especially the group that we went to our conference with, we really bonded over our conversations with what we were learning each day. When we would talk at dinner, what ideas did you see? How are we going to use these? And I remember having a conversation one of those nights where we're going to go back in a couple days. We're going to go back to our different buildings. What's going to happen then? And we decided, a group of us, that we weren't going to let the conference end. We've just been creating our own meetings, and we've had trouble this month getting everybody together, but we're still trying to meet every month. And we've got people from different backgrounds and buildings, and we get together, talk about what we want to work on in our buildings, what kind of things that we've been doing this year that are new, and trying to give back to each building, and then also to go beyond our building. I've teamed up with Colin back there, and we co-created a presentation that we recently gave for the Gifted Association of Missouri Conference. It was our first presentation together, and we are working on trying to take that to the next level and get to more speaking engagements. And our focus was essentially, how do we create change and how do we help people over the roadblocks of introducing new programs, and what kind of barriers can we help them break down?
I confess, I, like Tommy and also Jessica, looked forward to this every month. It was a very collaborative group. So much fun to really be a part of listening and learning from them as well. So they've been great models in the first cohort. I've joked around that good luck having the second cohort be as much fun as the first cohort, but so far they're holding up their end of the bargain. Craig, did you want to, if we go to the next slide, there we go.
So the Aspiring Admin is just getting started, so we have our date November 4th. We're gonna go out and visit some buildings. It's gonna be a lot of practical experience going out and talking with other principals. These are the tent poles, really, of what we're going to study and what I'd like them to learn about. Kind of what I think is the most important at the top, and then what takes up the most of your time as an admin at the bottom. But Tom already came to the CPI training, so he is certified in nonviolent crisis intervention already, so he's off and running. But we'll maybe be back next year to talk about how this goes.
You said, Craig, it was funny because you said just started, but I was a product of this at Lindbergh 22 years ago. So
I
it
was
works. There you go. You were a part of it
Well,
with
some
me.
would say because I'm here it didn't work, but
I think it did. One question I had for both groups would just be, you mentioned national conferences and the collaboration is awesome too. What about the promotion of certain organizations, Phi Delta Kappa, the SASSP, things like that?
That was really not a purpose of the teacher leadership cohort. I'm not sure, something like SASSP would be more fitting for aspiring administrators, so that's definitely something we could look at.
Because like the Phi Delta Kappa, they have that Emerging Leaders Program, which provides a lot of those national conferences free.
Then we definitely need to look into that.
Yeah, yeah, do that. That's great. And for your group, Craig, I would welcome anybody at the middle school level in my building. Thanks.
So I think it's important for the board to understand, so this builds on top of each other, so in order to get into the Aspiring Administrators Academy, you have to go through the teacher leadership. So it's kind of just continues to grow leaders, and by the time we get done spending 2+ years probably with them, we'll know, hey, do they have the chops or not to sit in the chair? And so that's the best way to make sure when you grow your own that you spend that length of time with them to really get to know them as leaders and educators.
All right, any further questions on teacher leadership or aspiring administrators? Okay, next and final slide for teaching and learning. Infinite Campus timeline. Just want to go through a little bit of a project that was not on our compass because we were not anticipating. Actually, I shouldn't say it was not on our compass. It was on our compass a year ago to investigate our student information system and determine if we wanted to make a switch from Tyler SIS to another platform. We did spend last year doing a deep dive and ultimately decided that we were going to stay with Tyler SIS. However, in that process, we narrowed it down to 2 options that we really considered deeply. And that's important to note as I go through the rest of this slide. This summer, after we determined that we were going to stay with Tyler SIS, we received notification from the company that they were going to be discontinuing their student information system in order to focus on their logistics software, and that they were partnering with Infinite Campus, who would take over the SIS, or the student information side, and a path to migrate our data would be provided, as well as integration of their logistics software with Infinite Campus. Infinite Campus is one of the finalists that we had looked at last year in the investigation. It was really one that rose to the top, primarily for its integration with Canvas, which, as you all know, our learning management system is something we've invested a lot of time, energy, and development in support of our students. So that integration with Canvas was extremely important and was the reason that we ultimately decided that even though Tyler SIS was saying they were partnering with Infinite Campus, we wanted to investigate further, question, but all of the work that we had done last year, in addition to the migration path, made the decision really noteworthy that Infinite Campus was the way to go. Just within the last month, we have spent a lot of time talking with the providers for Infinite Campus to investigate what that transition plan looks like. Spent some time with the Technology Board Advisory last month, getting feedback on the timeline for that, and we are looking at making a migration to this going into the 23-24 school year. So what you see through the rest of this timeline is the work that we need to do to prepare for that. So a lot of development of the implementation plan between now and December, really starting to dig in on trainings early in January, because in order to be ready for the 23-24 school year and using Infinite Campus, we have to develop our master schedules, we have to do course codes, all of those things. So there's a lot of work that will happen in the winter in Infinite Campus to be able to fully implement in the 23-24 school year. We'll continue trainings throughout the spring. Each year, as you know, we do annual online verification. We are going to move that to Infinite Campus as well. So we need to develop all of those forms within Infinite Campus so that they are ready to go to families at the end of the school year. Lots of trainings over the summer for teachers, administrators, nurses, our food service, anyone who, you don't realize how many people touch your student information system. So a lot of focus on training and support. And then we'll start off I should say also, we are going to use it for summer school. So we'll get a small trial run of using it with students in the summer before our full implementation in August. Dominic's joining us as well. He's way better about answering the technical questions than I am. I've got the big picture stuff, but if you've got technical questions about data migration, because obviously the training of this so that its usability is very strong is important, but so is assuring that we retain all of the data, that our student records are secure. That's a really essential part of this as well.
So I want to make sure everybody understands, because when you hear that, you're like, oh my gosh, that's a lot in a year. Why are we going so fast? Internal conversations were, as the longer we put off this, how many years did they give you to migrate over? Like 3?
And yes.
We felt like if we didn't do that, the customer service from Tyler by year 3 would be non-existent. And so we just felt like internally, I know it's a lot, but we need to rip that Band-Aid off and get over there as quick as we can, because we were just worried about the service, like, hey, we got this glitch, we need you to work on this programming, it's not running right, we're gonna be out of business in the next 18 months, so we were just really, because it's a lot. I mean, when I heard it again, I was like, yeah, it's a lot, but we have the team that can do it, and Dominic can do it, we have the resources to do it, and if we need more resources, we'll figure that out. But I just wanted you guys to be clear, because you guys might be thinking, why are we putting so much pressure on ourselves to get there next year? Why not go a little bit slower?
And I would add too, we're doing a lot of work with standards-based learning and reporting, and the investment in learning one system to turn around and learn a new system 2 years later does not make a lot of sense for our teachers. So that was also another push for making this transition sooner than later, because we're piloting some of that work in different areas, and for people to master one platform only for it to disappear does not value their time.
You got your expert to the left of you right there.
Any questions on Infinite Campus?
I just have a comment, just a real quick comment. The technology committee was present with all of this, and everybody there pretty much thought that the timeline, while it's aggressive, was best for everybody too, also for families, because otherwise parents would have been switching systems in the middle of the year, and that would have been really difficult, I think, for families as well. So that was another reason that this timeline was thought to be good.
Anyone else? Thank you, Dr. Sparks.
All right, thank you.
And we are making good time on our workshop this evening, so we're going to pause and take a 5-minute break. All right, so we'll be back
Awesome.
in 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Hey, Craig, thank you. Dr. Sparks said thank you to Ronnie, but I just want to say thank you to you.
now we will move to Joelle on business and finance.
I'm going to make one little comment before that's not on the slide, because I know we're making the change over to Infinite Campus. This year, we're also making a change over from School Dude, which is our work order inventory system. Similar reason that the School Dude is no longer going to be offering those services. So it's a year for change as far as background software. A lot for our people to learn, so.
You want to have Rose sit here in case we want to ask him questions?
Sure.
Yeah, all right. I know you're not, you got a few things to do before that, but you can sit there. Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, Artie's gone, yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
So, business and operations, we're making progress on our compass goals for this year, so I'm highlighting just a few of them at this workshop. One, the first one I'm talking about today is the enterprise fleet management. This was actually a compass goal a couple years ago that we ran through the process to investigate, research, and implement, and was delayed because of all of the availability of vehicles. We looked at leasing versus purchasing and some of the benefits that we can have at the district looking at leasing. The board approved that in 2020 at a board meeting, and then we've been on delay because there's no cars available. So the good thing is if you see some trucks, new trucks running around the district, that's where I figured I better put it on here, and you're like, where do we get the money for new trucks? It's been in process for a couple of years. We're supposed to have 4 of the 8 that we were going to implement the first year being delivered. We got 1 delivered last week and a couple more this week. The first 4, we added in this process vehicles for our security staff, just to phase in. So when the 4 get delivered, Terrell will have 1. The second in command on security will have the other one. And then Scott and then John Lewis will be with the final 2. The good thing about these trucks is, again, we're going to rotate them on an annual basis. It's because that equity, I always say, let's build equity in our house. Well, we're going to build equity in our vehicles, so we'll drive them for a year. We're in district. We're not going to use them a lot of mileage like a normal over-the-road thing. So pretty much the value in a year from now will probably be just about what we're, the equity we'll build in them will be what they're worth. So then we'll get the trade-in value, then we get that extra money, we invest it back in, and then it becomes a cycle. And so with this, pretty much our guys will get new trucks more often, and it'll cost us less. We had budgeted in the past about $100,000 for our fleet management, which was maintenance, landscape, not security. So security's getting added to this. But most often in the budget, when something got cut, it was the vehicles. And so we have some pretty ancient vehicles out there that are really not good gas mileage or anything like that. So if you see them moving around, that's what's happening.
And that process is kind of how we do our devices too. So
Right,
same
yes.
thing,
Yep.
we get value, we get equity when we trade them in,
Yep.
when the life is
We've moved a lot
so-
with this, with copiers, all that
Yeah,
kind of stuff.
copiers, so.
The second, go to the next slide, Colin. Another compass goal this year was really diving into our HVAC and roofing projects across the district. This worked out well because we have a new maintenance or director of maintenance, so this is a good thing for him to get his feet out there and get them wet, looking at roofs and looking at HVAC. We wanted to phase in cost as we look forward to a future bond issue of one of our largest projects, so worst first. We know with our Truman, it probably has the worst roof in the district, but we know we'll have some other ideas for Truman in the long run. But Scott and his team is working, visiting all the properties, looking at the roofs and documenting warranties and timeline on warranty and when they should be replaced. The second option on this was, of course, HVAC. As we're getting ready to go into winter, we know our high-flying buildings with hot-cold calls, Concord and ECE, ECE, the preschool program, we have tons of calls each year on those 2 systems. They are Daikin units, which is we can talk more about that when we get to Roe, but, and we're learning more. So we've done some audits in that area, and now we need to figure out, well, what do we need to do in the future? We audit it, we know something's not working, so now what's the next plan to replace? They're not at their life cycle, but they're not working, so all that data is being gathered and will be presented to the board later. But those are our two first to study in depth. I wish we would have got to them before it started getting cold, but that's okay, we've got Roe. Next slide. As far as another Compass goal is our investigate future no tax rate increase bond issue. We're working with our bond counsel. We've already met with them about potential funding, looking at our assessed valuation growth and our debt payoff. What kind of money could we get at a no tax rate increase? We've also, as I put on here, need to make sure we know the even years and odd number years and the election dates, which ones are simple majority and which ones are 4/7 vote. So I have that on here. Elections in April, August, and November in even number years are all 4/7 or 57% passage rate. And then odd number years, only the April election is the 4/7 and the rest are 2/3. So we've been having this conversation across the district, and I think Dr. Lake has talked about it in some of his listening and learning tours, but we would like to pursue probably an April 2nd, 2024 bond issue. We feel like the Prop R is going to be completely spent, and those projects we can show our taxpayers that we've fulfilled that $105 million bond issue. We've done everything we said we were going to do, and then we're going to go back for the next. As you know, really the only way to fund large capital improvements for school districts in Missouri is through a bond issue. We don't have operating revenue that really lets us put money into investing in our facilities. So implementation status, we're in progress. We're gathering data. We were preparing a timeline of work to be completed between now and if we want to go in April 2nd of 2024, we have to file with the state by January 23rd of 24. That's not too far away anymore. It seemed like a long time away when we first started talking about it, but it's really only a year away from this January that we would have to make a commitment to do so. So we task our Facility Advisory Committee this year. Their biggest project is working with us to develop a list of capital improvements. We are going to revisit the work we've done over the last couple of years with master facility reports. I need to share those out to our newer board members when we did a Truman conditions assessment, and then we also did a large school campus circulation and equity assessment with our architect, where they visited each campus, looked at our buses, how they're getting on and off our property, which we know that's one of our concerns district-wide, as well as equity. The schools that have a cafeteria and a gym in one cafeteria, be good for them to have a gym and a cafeteria. So I have that report and I need to share that out. But we're going to, our Facilities Advisory Committee is going to dive into those. Of course, we have new members that weren't on board when we did a lot of that work. So we're going to refresh them with that data. And then we're going to do our normal process of having the buildings, by December 15th of each year, let us know what they would like to see in their buildings. And I will tell you, we have a long list of things that we weren't able to fund in previous years that have carried forward. So we're building that list so that we can hopefully, next August, start getting out to our community and visiting our buildings and talking about an April bond election. So, any questions on those? Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is our energy improvement program. As we all know, we contracted with Navitas to invest in our buildings for our HVAC and anything that really has to do with the utility to save those costs. The goal of this is that we invest in our capital and then we save money over the course of time through our utilities, and then that pays off the loan. And then after that, we have the money ourselves to invest in other things. So the original cost, new cost during the program, and then after the program, everything is cheaper because we have more efficient systems throughout. Next slide. We invested almost $11 million in our facilities, everything but the high school, because it's already getting a major redo. So all of our other sites, an audit was done, and we made major improvements in different areas. And again, we are saving utilities on these new equipment. Next slide. So this, it's hard to see. I hate this slide because it's numbers, and you know how my numbers are always small. But there's a big number on the bottom there. The first year, I would say our first year didn't go as well as we had planned. We had something called a pandemic, where we had all of our fresh air coming in, and, you know, we opened up all the windows. And as you know, like when you live at home and your parents would say, shut that window, shut the door, don't let the air out. Well, we had everything open. So we had a goal of projected savings about $369,000 in our first year. That does include some rebates on equipment that we received the first year. And we have verified savings the first year after it was final of about $240,000. So we didn't hit our mark about $100,000, but I can totally explain we weren't really operating as efficient as we could because of the pandemic. So the first year was good. We also, on our first year, were trying to phase it in somewhat because we didn't want to just go out to all of our buildings and have everybody implement at one time. So we took really our biggest concern buildings, which was Sperry and Concord, and started to build a process of whereby we would communicate with the buildings about the HVAC systems in their buildings. Next slide. This is another small one, but it tells you the kind of improvements that we made district-wide: lighting, water efficiency, weatherization, retro commissioning, energy management controls. So the control systems that we had throughout the district, they were all different years. So if something was implemented 20 years ago, then central office was implemented 5 years ago, all the control systems were on different platforms because they were all implemented at different times. HVAC improvements was, of course, a very large one, and then they also helped us, Navitas, with the secure vestibules, because that was something that could be funded under energy savings. Next slide. This is our BAS system, which is now all of our buildings. The high school will have this too when it's complete, is a monitoring system of all of the HVAC units district-wide. HVAC, what else is on here, Ro, besides pretty much the HVAC? Boilers, chillers, which has to do with HVAC. So this is the system that right now our energy manager, Navitas and Ro, has access to ongoing, and then our internal staff, Scott and Keith, which is our lead HVAC person, he also has access to this to keep an eye on what's happening in the buildings with their systems. Next slide. But the thing I'm really proud of, I guess, you know, we have all this technology and we have all this new equipment, but the rollout to our buildings, and Ro, I have to remember your last name, how to say it. Punsalee. He is our assigned energy manager from Navitas. I think one of the big things that we liked about Navitas was the education afterwards. You know, you can have somebody come in and do new equipment and things like that, but with this group, we were able to get a 3-year plan where after everything is installed, we get somebody like Ro, who lives right down the street here, who is going to stay with us for 3 years and try to educate our staff and our administration about how the HVAC, our water, and everything works in their buildings. So again, I said we started this program pilot with Concord and Sparing, and everybody knows Ro now because he gets out in the buildings, things that we don't always have time to do, and meets with the administration and then meets with the teachers, and he's been in BLT meetings. He's part of what we have developed as a hot-cold report. We used to take phone calls to the maintenance department that would say, Stephanie, I'm hot, Stephanie, I'm cold. And now we have a system where teachers can report into their secretary if they're hot or cold. Ro sees that immediately, and then he's in the area so he can go out to the sites to see what's going on. So he's another set of eyes for the district on monitoring things that are happening as far as weather in the buildings. He's met with our facility crew. He's well known everywhere, except the high school. So that's our next thing, when we get that project complete, is to bring them on. He makes site visits, he takes calls, and really, I think the biggest thing with the teachers groups was just letting them know how to control the thermostat in their room. You know, it's like you may be pressing up, but it's not going anywhere. He was able to get information out about what your thermostat says, how far you can go up, how far you can go down, as far as temperature-wise, and I think that's made a big difference with our staff on just knowing how to use their thermostat in their room. What else? I mean, I think, Ro, what was one of the biggest things? So, yep. Next slide. I have reports if you guys want them on everything that data-wise, this is available on every school, but just if you look at the top as an example of Concord, where you see the red lines, that was all savings after an implementation of a schedule that Navitas put in play. So all of the red is savings and energy that we didn't use after them monitoring our programs and helping us with schedules. Next slide. This is another example. They would put a schedule in for sparing, and you can see at the top in February, they put the schedule in. And on real time, our Navitas team is watching our programming. And so in March, when you see the purple line that went all the way across, that was like something's going on at sparing that's not right. He sees these live in the morning, Keith sees them live in the morning, and Scott, and then he would head out to the building and say, what's going on? So it's live access to our energy programming, and we have quick fixes, really sometimes before the teachers even know what's happening. And the next slide. We're also very excited about the second year data. This is, again, a year in play, and then we report out that. But the second year, we really took a look at summer and how the buildings were utilized over the summer and put scheduling in by phases. I know a lot of the custodians teams were doing we'll do first floor, second floor, third floor. But if your HVAC unit is stacked, you know, and not first floor, second floor, third floor, you're really not saving any energy by doing it that way. So we started meeting in March with our facilities team and the custodial supervisors about scheduling work and HVAC, their work over the summer based on HVAC zones. I'll have to say we were able to start with them in March because of all of the information about summer programming now going out in February. You know, when we didn't do our summer programming until April, we really couldn't have done this. So we were able to jump on the back of that and then add this. And so I'm very excited about sharing the year 2 results with you guys about what we saved just over the summer. And we plan to do that again this year. So it is paying itself back, and we hope in a shorter period than we expected. We have Ro on site to help us again throughout this year and next year. We'll bring online the high school when it comes open in August, and then we'll figure out how we want to take it from that point forward. But it's making a difference district-wide, and everybody's learning a little bit about their buildings and being positive about it. So I think that's a big thing when you start messing with people's air conditioning. So, or heat. And that's all I have. A lot more information if you want it, and books of data. So anytime somebody wants
You did a good job of shortening your presentation,
I
by the
know,
way.
I told
Not that
Bro,
I
he worked so hard on it. And I
told you you needed to, but
we can kill you with data. So.
Ro, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. So he's been a wonderful asset. So, and again, it's about changing some behaviors and systems that we've had in play, and we're going to see the savings of that. So, thanks. So I did just want to make sure, because we didn't pause on the future Prop 2024. Any questions? I know Joelle kind of laid that out there. I think next August will be more me going out to buildings and communities and saying, here's what we have tentatively kind of got, what are we missing? And then in January, like we've done in the past, I'll go out and say, like, at Concord, here's what's on, what we've kind of identified as your bond projects that potentially could be there, kind of this and that. So August, we'll be kind of still going and getting some input. We'll give them from the facility planning, we will come up with a list as a starting point for a conversation with each school community. And then we will then kind of finalize that and go back out in January and say, here's what we've kind of finalized and here's where we are. So, questions? And like Joelle said, we will be wrapping up the high school about a year from now. And then the new parking lot and everything should be done about a year from now. And then we'll get to thinking about passing hopefully something successfully in the spring of '24. So, all right. Back to Dr. Sparks is going to lead us through just quickly, just so that the community that's out there watching or will watch later. We actually read this book. We're set to discuss this in our board workshop in the spring of 2020, but there was that thing called the pandemic that hit, so we have put this on. I know a lot of us had read the whole book and have had to go back and look at some notes and some other things, and so, and some of us, I think, maybe read it for the first time. But now we're gonna just quickly, just a couple conversations around, just a couple questions around the book. So Dr. Sparks, I'm gonna give it to you.
Well, you took away all my thunder. I was just going to say
Sorry.
This is the best part of the conversation tonight. It really is meant to be an open-ended conversation about the first 5 chapters of the book, What School Could Be, which I know, I'm assuming that you also found this as inspiring, thinking about the ideas that are within this book. So just really wanted to open it up to conversation about the concepts and ideas that stood out to you in this first half of the book.
Well, I have noticed, because we did put this on hold for so long, a lot of the concepts that would have been in the spring of 2020, kind of like, oh, we haven't done this, we should look into this, we have already started doing and implementing in our schools. There was one part in particular that really spoke to me, and they were talking about kind of an elite private school that, you know, did their finals at the end of the year. Most kids, like, their average grade was a B+, and then they took away questions and just kept the things, those most important things, that non-negotiables that those kids should have known, and re-gave the final with just that portion when they came back in the fall, and the average score was an F. And it just, I mean, and I look back at my own education and think, oh yeah, I learned about that, but I don't remember any of that, and how it doesn't apply in my work, my day-to-day life, anything like that.
Relevance.
Real, just like we're talking about the real world learning and the competency-based experience and that interest. You know, for me, when I go back and I look back at these first 5 chapters, it really, like the notes that I have here on this piece of paper, it really goes back to what Jen was saying, that relevance of my education, that interest in helping kids find, you know, an interest or a passion or a connection to teach the concepts that we believe is most important. Because at least me, when I did, and I had my hands on and I was active in my learning, I always retained that information. And I think when you look at the examples of this, and just for the community that's out there, this is a book that's, you know, Tara referenced, it's What School Could Be. And it's just places across our country that are looking at how we can educate our kids differently, instead of like all of us were probably educated, that, lack of a better word, that drill and kill, and we got to teach you to this test, and then you're going to spit that information back out on that test, and then you may retain some of it, you may not. So just that interest piece, and really creating a culture that drives interest for kids and for staff, is just, that's what comes out to me.
One part that stood out to me is, to go along with that, I really liked how they talked about this idea of kids creating a portfolio of joy, and that school is a place where they should come and be happy and want to learn and be excited about learning, and kind of moving away from those traditions of, we have to take this test and we have to perform a certain way, but like, what is driving our kids? What are driving our students to want to succeed, to want to learn, to want to collaborate, and with, you know, our 4 Cs and everything that we're doing in this district. I loved that idea of a portfolio of joy, and our kids being able to create that in themselves. And so, yeah, it was really exciting and inspiring.
I guess for me, I was excited, and it may not have explicitly said it in this book about the learner profile, but I really am interested in what the students learn while they're with us, but also the experiential learning and how we can put that Carnegie unit credit to that. I think with the Success Ready and things like that, blending those two things together, because I like what you're saying about joy and having them feel comfortable, the sense of belonging, all that stuff is awesome. We still need them, multiple ways for them to prove that they have competency over those things. So not the drill and kill, but then also, we're not just loving learning and choosing everything à la carte, that it fits together and that they can prove that mastery.
And that evidence-based is really important. We've chased numbers in education forever, and we don't have to chase numbers. I do think there are situations where we need to have a number. Like you said, we need to know how are we doing, but not everything that counts can be counted. And what is that evidence that shows our kids are set up to go and be successful? And so that's a really important piece to me.
So as
From it, it was in the Michigan school Gone Boarding program, where they taught the students how to make snowboards, or maybe it was skateboards too. It was any kind of board you wanted to make. And that sounds like a fun, frivolous project, but the kids were learning math, physics, chemistry. They used computer-aided design in order to do it. And they studied the history of boarding, and they had to do writing and reading assignments that went with it. And so it was taking everything that these kids need to learn and putting into one project where they could really apply it. And the program was incredibly successful, and a lot of the kids go to work for Burton Boards in Vermont. And I know we don't have a huge snowboarding contingency here, but that idea can be applied across so many different areas where we don't have to have 6 classes to focus on individual concepts. They can have a project that hits everything. I thought that was just really compelling.
So as an educator, so I look at this and I think back to when I was teaching math. So now I'm teaching computer science. But when I was teaching math, we taught kids how to solve equations in algebra. And yes, that's an important skill, but there exists an app on your phone that you can get that will literally solve the equation for you and give you the step-by-step. So as I read this, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, what were the skills that I taught my students when I taught them how to solve an equation? Yes, I was teaching them problem-solving skills, but really, what were the skills that they were gaining? They really weren't able to then apply those algebra skills to solve that real-world component piece. And so that is definitely a piece that's missing that I see at the high school level. And it brings me great joy to see classes like a drone class where kids are going to walk away with a pilot's license to fly drones. And so that right there is what you're speaking of, that tangible learning where they're able to walk away from high school with something. And there's so many more programs out there now that exist, like Launch Code and Cyber Up, where kids can go into a field, get an internship, and not even have to go to a 4-year university. So we need to be harnessing those opportunities for our kids, and with CAPS and all this stuff. So yeah, back in 2020, this was been a great conversation to have, but we're definitely making great strides.
I want to just tack on to that idea that this conversation is so different than the conversation we had when we first read the book. That's such a good point. And I also, my note in the book was from 2020, how do we bring our parents along on this conversation? How do we explain how this works and why it's valuable in our community? And seeing how we've started to do that and how we'll continue to do that it's fun to see.
And I guess none of you are attending the Schools of the Future conference, which is in Hawaii. In a day and a half that he is headlining?
I'll volunteer.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
I was just playing around here.
We will be good stewards of taxpayer dollars.
Thank you. No, this looks awesome though, because they just digging into more information on the website from the author and the consortium of people that he's working with. It's kind of interesting.
I'm really intrigued by the concept of knowledge, and I think that's something we've been grappling with in teaching and learning quite a bit. We talk all the time about the fact that you can have any information, it's right here, we carry it around with us. And that's true, but how do we build understanding of that? Because the understanding of that knowledge is really what helps us in the problem solving. It's not that you've memorized how to do the equation, it's that you understand the concept behind the equation. It's not that you are able to create something. It's how do you create something that has relevance because you understand a problem at a deep level. So that idea of moving away from the concrete to the understanding and merging that with your skill sets, when we talk about problem-based and project-based learning, that's really what should be at the heart of it, that there is that understanding of deep transferable learning that can apply in multiple situations.
Well, and I'll go back to, I think it was our first year, and we're out exploring, and Tara and I are together, and we're looking at a school, and it was a project-based learning school. And what we walked away from there was, it was fun, it was neat, but it wasn't what Kathy was getting at. It wasn't what Julia referenced. It didn't have those embedded standards that we know are important for our kids to learn, that our state says, these are standards, these are things that you need to learn, but you don't have to teach them sitting in a classroom, a traditional geometry class for 50 minutes, 3 days a week, and 90 minutes, 2 days a week, or whatever that is. So we don't have to do it that way. And I think that's at the heart, and what people have to understand is that it's not about that rigor or those concepts. It's about making it relevant so it sticks, so it's there. It's not, like Matt said, I mean, I can tell you, I did Algebra 1. I couldn't do that if I had to right now, so.
I think there was one part where they talked about MIT and engineering students, and they gave them 3 things, and you should be able to power them on, and none of them could figure it out, where two or three electricians figured it out instantaneously. So it's those real world skills. And I think the other hurdle is parents, like the part about the parents and the parents that, we have this tendency to try and rescue our kids. And there was one part about the parent who called and asked their child couldn't come to an interview for a job. They're like, well, can I come and do the interview? And in my real world experience, I had that once. Like a mom came and showed up after a kid didn't get a job trying to plead the case. So we have to get parents on board with this too, leaders and administrators and parents as well. Because, if a student has an aptitude towards real world skills and wants to go that direction, we have to get the parents to buy in too, and not.
We know, our parents and us know what we know, right? We were educated a certain way. That's what we know, right? So, and I go back to my first year, I had a dad at Sappington, and I'm out speaking, and I'm asking people, here's 12 success measures, here's jobs of the future that your kids are gonna have to face, they're gonna be 5 careers, 20 different jobs. This is a mindset. This is about content, but how do you teach those essential skills? And that's where we landed on the 4 C's, and just what does that look like? But I remember him specifically saying to me, and this will happen over time, and as we continue to have a conversation, he said, I always thought it was good enough for me, it's good enough for my kids. And after he heard that night, he's like, you're right. What they gotta go do in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years is gonna be so different than any generation ever. When you look at the baby boomers to the Gen Xers like me, there's slight changes, there's whatever, but the overall concept of what work looked like, pretty much the same. These kids, we got 2 of them sitting in here with us right now, it will look totally different, and we have to continue to evolve what our educational system looks like.
And they do have a workshop here for mobilizing your community, actually, Beth, but from his group, they said they can do it in person or virtually, so there's some resources here.
I think that's what I appreciated most in here was the one page talks about developing a purpose and competencies and agency. And as I read that, I reflected upon my own education and me as a high school graduate, and wow, I didn't have agency. There was no way. And so having that here in our work with the 4Cs, and then towards the end, chapter 5 was about that bridge to college. And I think I feel like we are crossing that bridge, making it a little easier for kids to graduate and have that agency and have the competencies and be able to navigate college or whatever they're doing after. They don't have to go to college, which is what they talked about in here, trade school or a 40-hour job. And so I think that's what I appreciated about it. I think it was good.
Beth and I had talked about this, and I think it's come back to me, is that in one of our next e-notes going out, we talked about before the pandemic about letting our parents know what are we reading and make copies available of this for our families. So if you're watching out there tonight and you're intrigued by this book or this conversation, we reach out to us, email us, and we will get you a copy of this. But I think, we got to get our 2 students copies first. They're coming, so they're coming. But yeah, just going back to that, letting them know that, then I think that's another way to build the capacity of our parents and understanding of what we're trying to do with our kids.
Well, that's a great idea, and I think Tara and I had even talked about making that available, but also how do we engage them in the conversation? So if they do have questions or thoughts after reading it, just like we're talking about this tonight, so.
I find myself pushing back on my own parenting quite a bit. Reading, the more I expand my thoughts about what my children's future can be, and pushing back against the antiquated ideas that I have from my own experience. Jen and I actually were having a conversation just this last weekend at a community ed soccer game about the idea of math specifically, and at what point which math sequence is the practical application. And they reference that in here about AP stats or stats classes and the relevance of that to a much broader experience beyond the school environment. And that's not to dissuade students from going a different path, but it's really to align with what's the math that you need for the practices that you expect to use in your life. So for my child who is a very, art and humanities child, I would coach them one direction versus my student who's very, computer science centric, and what that would look like for that child. So just being really thoughtful about what are the things that are going to really accelerate what you need to be successful in life, and it does not look the same for every student. But I think we get stuck on that, and they reference it in the book, we get stuck on that, how to get into the best college, how to get the most scholarships, which as a mom of a high schooler, I'm worried about those. Those are really real things, but how to merge those 2 things together? Well, that's our challenge.
And I encourage anyone to read this, because as somebody who came from a household with one parent who was not educated, even through high school, and highly successful, and my mother was highly educated, and she said, "You're going to college," and anybody who knew my mom, if she said something, you just did it. But now I have a college senior, and I see things totally different. I thought it was college or nothing, but I don't feel that way anymore. So if you can pick this up and read it, if you have any uncertainty, I encourage it, really.
Any last thoughts? We'll move to adjournment then. Do I have a motion to adjourn Board Workshop 1562?
So moved.
Motion by Kathy.
Second.
Second by Mike. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0.